So I put my own title to it, A Few Good Men. Opening credits, A Few Good Men. I will state my purpose right away. I call for a constitutional reformation and a reimagination of our collective mindsets in the fight against corruption and state capture in aid of national development. That is my thesis. That is my conclusion. But as if in a flashback, I will now attempt to work my way backwards to my conclusion. So you already know what I'm going to say. Let me quickly point out, though, that I do not pretend to propound an elixir in the fight against corruption. Indeed, I doubt if any exists. I do not have any definite answers. I wish I had. I am much the poorer in this regard. Here I am to tell you a bit of what I have encountered in the fight against corruption. It seems to me that as it stands, there are only a few good men among us. Hopefully, the pieces I share today will spur us on collectively to comprehensively suppress and repress corruption and state capture. I have shared some of what I say today in the past, but they bear repeating. Professor, I'm a reluctant occupier of the position of the special prosecutor, in the sense that I neither asked for this position, nor did I lobby for it. I'm not inclined to recount how I got to sit in this seat, except to say that the position was laid on my head. Sacrificially, I eventually accepted the position after several weeks of prompting. I allude to sacrifice because the acceptance of the job required me to drastically change my lifestyle and my life as I knew it. Not that I was engaged in some opprobrious vocation or habit, not in the least, but that I was a fun-loving and outdoorsy reveling type, being an elite worker. I cannot do anymore most of the things which bore a meaning to my life, in my estimation, because the job requires so. The job demands so. That is one aspect of the sacrifice. Purely private quests, you would say. The other aspect of the sacrifice is impersonal. That is that the position of the special prosecutor is a very thankless job. It fetches you droves of enemies daily, and it brings you into frontal contact with the lowest forms of debasement in humans. You do not go asking for it. It finds you. That is the nature of the job. Everyone wants the special prosecutor to do his job, yet no one wants the special prosecutor to do his job. It all depends on the subject of the investigation. This paradoxical predicament is perhaps an index of the human condition, which is that though we accept that we need to rein in corruption, yet no one wants to yield freely to scrutiny. No one happily accedes to indictment. No one welcomes investigations. No one wants to be called out as suspected of engaging in corruption and corruption-related activities. And so, there is always a strong pushback intended at deflecting the focus of scrutiny and accountability. The pushback is reflected in so many forms, including the sponsorship of attacks and vile publications against the special prosecutor and the office of the special prosecutor, OSP. Sadly, some of the enemies the job attracts would not hesitate to take a life should opportunity present itself. Thus, my security risk is ultra high, and I have to perpetually be on the lookout for attacks on my person. Same applies to especially the operational officers of the OSP. Such is the volatility in which the fight against corruption is being waged in our nation. And the only fine hour of the job is the hope that one is helping to build a just and fair society. One only hopes that it is not a hopeless sort of hope, and that is a hopeful sort of hope. This perhaps accounts for the realism of only a few good men in the space, as I see it. In the ordinary circumstances of mankind, not many persons would offer their services and expend their energies in such a charged environment. The fight against corruption demands immense sacrifice from us all. It requires purging oneself of reproach first, and then forming a containment ring of communal reckoning, of not having a choice about it, but to keep suppressing and repressing such acts. It is upon this aspiration I proceed further. Part 1. The usual suspects: corruption and state capture. Corruption is as old as time itself. If you put any premium on the creation story in the Bible, then it will seem that from the moment Eve allowed herself to be beguiled by the serpent, which precipitated the fall of man from grace, the human situation has been forged negatively in corruption. I have always wondered how the serpents procured the guileful information about the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. Who passed the information to the serpent, and for what purpose? And what was in it for the serpent? What did he stand to gain from that venture? The serpent certainly got a just desert afterwards by being forever consecrated to go about on his belly. Though we are not told, it seems to me that the serpent did not act alone. Do you think? It appeared certainly to be in cahoots with others. It was a masterfully calculated act. It must have been set to it by co-conspirators who wanted to assure the fall of man. Again, it seems to me that the first case of delict, which attracted opprobrious sanctions, had corruption written all over it. In the past 26 years or so, the fight against corruption has engaged global attention on almost the same scale as the human rights drive which preceded it. Now we're a bit quiet on human rights, aren't we? Now we are very vociferous on corruption. From the applaudable efforts by Transparency International, which took it upon itself to fight global corruption through the augmentation of the fight by other international organizations, notably the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, further through the adoption of national policies, laws, and regulations by states, to the involvement of civil society and corporate bodies, the fight against corruption is presently the universal bride. Perhaps we cannot describe the melee of corruption better than as captured by our own Kofi Annan in his foreword on the General Assembly resolution adopting the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. I like to repeat this quote. Doesn't like my left hand. Corruption is an insidious plague that has a wide range of corrosive effects on societies. It undermines democracy and the rule of law. It leads to violations of human rights. Corruption is an insidious plague that has a wide range of corrosive effects on societies. It undermines democracy and the rule of law. It leads to violations of human rights. It distorts markets, erodes the quality of life, and allows organized crime, terrorism, and other threats to human security to flourish. We would agree with our departed brother Kofi Annan, and much energy and scholarship have been expended on the challenges confronting the fight against corruption. I have no intention of boring you with an enumeration of these well-known and oft-lamented difficulties. We know them all so well, and they play out so debilitatingly in the politics of anti-corruption. Actually, we owe a disconsolate tribute to the challenges as a reason for the unhappy state of the fight against corruption. In my estimation, corruption begets morally opprobrious conduct. It engenders greed and individual interests. It encourages the setting aside of rules. It lowers standards in all aspects of life. The effect of corruption is all around us. Huge sums of public money that could provide social amenities to our people are funneled into private pockets. We hear stories of corruption in almost every interaction with the systems of the state. We hear talk that apparently one needs to pay a bribe to obtain some government jobs, to obtain school postings, to pass exams, to triumph in elections. Does that sound familiar? Even to obtain some state identification documents. The list is endless. In this society, which is governed by what I term pay-to-play rules, the poor and the marginalized lose out completely. The other suspect, state capture, is itself a form of corruption. It is characterized by a few interests and persons capturing the decision-making and resource allocation systems and processes of the state. In effect, the captured economy is nothing more than a reflection of the few captors who steer the nation solely for their private benefit to the woe of the aggregate national interest. The few captors become the state, and the state becomes them. The state is then reduced to merely a sort of private property. In this scheme of affairs, nothing stands in the way of the few captors, and they engage in corruption to fantastic degrees. Part 2. Disappearing acts. We know we must act. We know we have no choice. The question has been, what course do we take? And how do we stem the tide of corruption and its satellite moon, state capture? This light is very unfriendly. I can hardly see what I'm reading. It was a rather curious push against corruption that heralded our independence from colonial rule, which all came together by a conglomeration of interrelated events which commenced severally in the past and culminated in historic occurrences on one day, 9 years before independence. Thank you. Still to that. Yeah. Thank you. Right. It's better now. I can see. In the morning of Saturday, 28 February 1948, exactly 77 years to the day, members of the ex-servicemen's union, especially those in Accra, must have felt very upbeat that by the end of the day, their long drawn-out grievances against those in authority would be well received by the head of government and perhaps usher in a turnaround in their fortunes and that of the country. However, by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 had been shot dead, and more than 60 lay writhing in pain from various degrees of injury from gunshots. Their crime: they had been minded to assemble and symbolically march in a peaceful and armed procession to present a petition to the colonial governor at his official residence at the Christiansborg Castle in Osu. Upon reaching the triangular intersection of what was then Row Road, Castle Road, and Christiansborg Road, they were ordered by Superintendent Imre, a white superintendent of police in Accra. The order was simple: halt, turn, and disperse. They refused. Public order that morning, as his men later recounted, carried out his own order by grabbing a rifle and shooting at the procession. The painful irony was that the ex-soldiers had survived brutal battles in the Second World War, only to be mowed down by a police officer of the empire they served for simply participating in a benign procession intended for the presentation of a petition. These events are well known and well documented. It is their contextual significance, which I will state presently, that invites me to their revisitation. Let's pause for a while. That day also held another significance. It was the day on which the boycott of European and Asian stores, which had been observed nationwide from January 1948, was to end, and the reduction in prices of certain commodities was to come into effect. Our people expected a bountiful price reduction. They were to be disappointed. The price reduction was not what they expected. It is also well documented that these events precipitated a 5-day looting and overrunning of European and Asian businesses in Accra and other towns as news of the killing of the 3 ex-soldiers spread. While the reports of the Commission of Inquiry into what was described as disturbances in the Gold Coast attributed the primary cause of the riot to the shooting incident on 28 February, the extensive testimony the Watson Commission took from our people showed that the contextual significance of these events was largely a fight against corruption. Of long-held and widespread frustration and disenchantment at corruption and abuse of power by the colonial government and European and Asian businesses organized as the Association of West African Merchants. The ex-soldiers were being dealt a very raw deal. At the commencement of the Second World War, the colonial government enticed them with promises of jobs and lucrative pensions after service in the army and participation in the war. So they were shipped off to fight in what is now Myanmar. Now, upon their return, and about 3 years after the end of the war, the colonial government had reneged, and it showed no inclination to make good the promises. Indeed, the governor, who had just assumed office 6 weeks prior to 28 February, totally misread the events of the day. He appeared to view the occurrences on 28 February as an unprovoked challenge to his authority, because he had assumed that the protests had been organized by local politicians. His reaction was then to imprison 6 of the prominent politicians. The ex-soldiers were not unique in their agitation. This is what the governor did not realize. The general population was highly disenchanted with this state of affairs. There had been widespread protests before 28 February against low wages, abusive working conditions, and undue hardship propelled by the insensitivity of the colonial government and the corrupt practices of the Association of West African Merchants, which included price fixation, price gouging, and conditional sales. The testimony collected by the Watson Commission showed that the association, which controlled the import and export market, was sometimes making as much as 75% profit on each commodity sold. Indeed, so pervasively corrupt were their activities that the acronym of the association, AWAM, AWAM, became synonymous with unfair, corrupt, and fictitious practices and conduct. So when you're watching a movie and you go, oh, this is AWAM, you should know where it is coming from. This was our state as we stood on the brink of independence. We fought grand corruption perpetrated against us by foreigners. Maybe we inherently loathed corruption. I'm talking in the past tense. Maybe we engaged in that struggle because it directly affected our income levels and livelihoods. Of course, if someone is price gouging to 75% abnormal profit, you would rebound on it. Maybe it was both. The point is that we did fight. A good fight, it was too. 9 years later, we became independent. Then we took over our own affairs. And here we are. In politics and business, we became masters of our own destiny. What did we do? Need I tell you? We descended into the fray. Now we were in charge. Since then, we have been unable to put a secure lid on the cauldron of corruption, and our efforts appear to be disappearing acts. Indeed, as my brother Senor alluded to, every government we have had cited corruption in its predecessor government. It has been such a race to the bottom that the easy excuse of all the coup makers and plotters, successful and unsuccessful, has been to level corruption charges against those they overthrew or attempted to overthrow. On this score, I'm not taking the coup makers and plotters association to task. That is not why we are here today. We will revisit that another day. Today, I'm only saying There was indeed corruption at every turn and time, so they could easily mount an excuse on that mount to overthrow or attempt to overthrow a government. As a result, we have had about 50 corruption-related commissions of inquiry and 5 successful military coups in the name of fighting corruption. We are parties to several international treaties on corruption, including the UN Convention, which we ratified on 24 June 2007. We have passed several legislations designed to tackle corruption. We have redefined corruption and enhanced the punishment for corruption-related offenses from misdemeanors to second-degree felonies. We established the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice and the Serious Fraud Office, which we rechristened the Economic and Organized Crime Office. And we established the Financial Intelligence Center with the same intended purpose, though to a limited degree. And in 2014, we instituted the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan, which recommended the establishment of an independent prosecution authority to effectively tackle corruption. You would recall that the prevailing thinking was that the Attorney General, being a member of Cabinet and the chief legal advisor to the President, was not well suited to investigate and prosecute members of a government to which he belonged. And after decades of contemplation and experimentation, we created the Office of the Special Prosecutor, OSP, as a flagship anti-corruption institution with a unique fourfold mandate of investigating corruption and corruption-related cases, prosecuting suspected offenders, recovering and managing assets, and taking steps to prevent corruption. The advent of the OSP, once again you would recall, was forged in immense controversy. Let me take you back to the 2016 presidential elections. Corruption and corruption-related issues were rather topical during that campaign season, owing to the ever-present, unexplainable, and questionable acquisition of wealth in all sectors. The opposition candidate hopped on to the anti-corruption train with a bouquet of promises. He promised them to adopt the Anas method in fighting corruption, in reference to the style employed by Ghana's foremost investigative journalist Anas Arimia Anas, of naming, shaming, and jailing. He also promised to create and establish a specialized independent agency to fight corruption. He christened it the Office of the Special Prosecutor. He won the election against the sitting president with a convincing margin. The campaign promised treaty obligation. Ghana was required anyway, under Article 6 and Article 36 of the UN Convention against Corruption, to establish an independent specialized authority to combat corruption through law enforcement. The intended design of the OSP was a cure of the inadequacies of the traditional anti-corruption regime characterized by the lack of real and enforcement powers. Hence, the OSP's multifaceted reach and outlook. Its independence by law was intended to be assured in the proper sense. I keep using the word intended. As the Special Prosecutor retains full authority and control over the investigation, initiation, prosecution, and conduct of cases. The OSP, unlike other institutions, is required to snoop around everywhere in whatever sector. And its mandate does not rest only in respect of public officials. It extends also to politically exposed persons and private persons. The reach of the OSP goes beyond the borders of Ghana. In this sense, the OSP has a mandate to investigate and prosecute corruption and corruption-related offenses committed in Ghana or in a foreign country, so far as the act constitutes corruption or corruption-related offense in Ghana, and the act was committed by a national of Ghana or against a national of Ghana. So elegant it seems on paper. So joyful it sounds to the ears of the anti-corruption campaigner until you go in. Beyond the seeming good feeling and the paper promises, never mind that the promises are written in a statute, graveness stares. The very existence of the OSP is hemmed so tightly as if in a vice, in an attempt to scuttle it. it should perhaps not be surprising, as its creation itself was greeted with immense skepticism. And it was attended by argument against argument as to why it was needed at all. Will it not be a duplication of institutions? Will it be allowed to function properly? Do we even need it? The questions poured. In fairness, the questions themselves were not altogether problematic. After all, we must carefully examine the utility of the creation of institutions. However, the result was the creation of an institution with never before seen powers and mandate. Fine. Yet, with a plethora of half-hearted statutory provisions which effectively tie its hands behind it. Along come the death knells. Not infrequently, we hear calls, a lot of the time, from very high places, that the OSP should be scrapped and that it serves no useful purpose. If indeed that is what we want to do, then let us do so. On another score, there have been and there are attempts to discredit the office and its principal officers unfairly and unjustly, attended by formidable resistance and pushback. Often, the attacks on the office and its principal officers are mounted by persons who are at the short end of an investigation or prosecution and the associates of such persons. The effect of the existential challenge confronting the OSP is that though the nation collectively acknowledges that we must fight corruption, yet there is also a specter that the flagship agency designed, even if imperfectly, to fight corruption is not needed and should be disbanded, while others actively undermine it and its principal officers. This has translated into a rather curious cycle. First, the outburst of an outcry when the OSP acts, and an outcry when it is seen as not acting. It is as if we do not know what we want. The situation in Ghana now is, and I stated this earlier, we must fight corruption, but we must not fight corruption. That is our state now. It all depends on where we stand in respect of an investigation. Our collective behavior shows that we do not reward integrity, and we do not want to reward integrity. The bi-malady of corruption and state capture has every intention of staying with us unless we act. In their various manifestations, they inhibit our progress and dissipate our resources. We experience their debilitating effects all around us in their full force, and they are ingrained in our society much like rituals. Meritorious or otherwise rightfully deserving standards for the allocation of opportunities and resources are eluding us. The abuse of entrusted power for private gain is the currency. Misrepresentation of events and facts for pecuniary gain has never been this attractive. And then there is a sprint for the inordinate control of state institutions and the public decision-making process. State institutions are being neutralized as appendages of individuals, and existing laws and the legal system are being weakened for private gain. Then, to further sink ourselves in our ill progress, we are flighting away and secreting our illicitly gorged up bounties to other jurisdictions to avoid detection and to evade recovery. And it seems to me that no one can put an actual price tag on the attendant social and economic cost of corruption and state capture. These are endemic in several sectors in the economy. A notorious suspect is the extractive industry. Offshore, we are confronted with the scourge of oil bunkering. On land, we are bedeviled with wanton destruction of protected forests and real property, and the mind-numbing pollution of our water bodies, all in the name of making wealth. Go ahead, get paid. We are standing at a single spot and spinning around slowly on one foot in a circle, much like a gyroscope. The conversation has become very sterile. The fight against corruption is proving to be an unruly bride indeed, I said some time ago. She is not lending herself to agreeable domestication and cohabitation. And we are not recording much success. Our progress is hampered, and we are unable to move the needle of development to any appreciable height. Our story is a cycle of self-defeat and disappearing acts. First, we begin by collectively acknowledging that we must fight corruption. That sort of lights a glimmer on the horizon that there is hope. Then we dim the glimmer by approaching the enterprise of the fight against corruption half-heartedly. That is to say, we appear to know the cure to the malaise, but we are unwilling to take the medication fully. It is as if we do not want to actually cure it. It's as if we want the disease, though we reckon it is slowly killing us. I dare say it is quite a head scratcher. Citizens view anti-corruption law enforcement institutions as largely hemmed in by political marginalization, and thus part of the problem. This is because citizens perceive a high incidence of impunity among the elite, as they should, and that corruption investigations will invariably amount to nothing and yield no consequences. I do not blame them. Further, citizens view those in authority as a problem, and they are quick to condemn corrupt acts attendant upon official acts, as they should. Yet, citizens play a significant role in the problem through acts of open support for official corruption and sometimes participation in same. Given the Ghana Institution of Engineering lecture about 2 years ago, I said this, that on another score, not too infrequently, the public decries the state's longevity and quality of our infrastructure. Why do we not have the best infrastructure as they do in some places? The citizen ponders. Why are our roads so bad? The motorist asks. This stretch of road was constructed just 2 years ago. Why has it developed craters for potholes already? He quizzes further. Whoever designed this roundabout or intersection does certainly live on another planet, a bystanding observer muses. Whose idea was it to design and fit such a closed-up claustrophobic casket of an elevator in such a huge and busy public building? A visitor fumes. Whoever designed the approaches and accesses to this building is certainly not a friend of disabled persons. Another visitor contemplates. We hear like complaints daily. We see the sources of the frustration and grumbling all around us. Professor, we may attribute some of these defaults to the poverty question. After all, if we had a wherewithal, we could insist on the very best and will not have to sort of beat back on the designs and construction of projects. We may not be inclined to output and accept the not so very best in that regard. And so, we may link some of the sources of the public consternation to the maintenance question, the lack of it, I mean, which in itself is likely an offshoot of the poverty question. Or we may trace it to our collective attitudes, if I may ask. From where I sit as a special prosecutor, poverty notwithstanding, I place these ills firmly at the door of corruption and state capture. They beget our poverty, which further begets more corruption. It is a poverty trap. We have to spring out of it to meaningfully develop. Simply put, we have managed to build for ourselves a solid culture of illegal and unfair gain, and it is strangling us. Part 3. I'm bringing it down. Glimmer on the horizon. It is not all despair, though. There is a glimmer on the horizon. The constitutional review process presents us with a golden opportunity to change the narrative and to get things effectively and efficiently working. we should transform the Constitution by weaving anti-corruption concepts and institutions tightly into its outlook and reach. And I am so glad that the chairman of the Constitution Review Commission is my reviewer. Professor, this is directly to you and your team. And right thereupon, after doing that, we should build on that framework a robust and pragmatic wave of statutory detail to give firm effect to the constitutional provisions to render corrupt activities high risk and ultra costly and unattractive enterprises. To do this, 4 truisms must guide this exercise. First, it must be borne in mind that the law always appears to be a step behind criminal innovation. And as technological advancement ushers in marvels hitherto unknown, perpetrators of corruption devise sophisticated ways adapted to avoid detection. Second, it should occur to everyone here that truth is always the first casualty in any criminal inquiry. Those who engage in grand corruption are wealthy. They possess the means and the wherewithal to mount formidable campaigns of misinformation and truth distortion. They also pose a real and present danger to anti-corruption officials through intimidation, open threats, and actual harm, even to the point of killing. Third, corrupt activities are the most difficult to prove, as they are carried out in stealth, and the state of mind accompanying such acts are often unclear. Fourth, corruption prevention is preferable to after-the-fact models of fighting corruption. This is because it is more productive and cost-effective. Better to prevent the outbreak of a stitch than to seek to sow it after it ensues. Upon this foundation, we must situate the fight against corruption in a comprehensive philosophical context. The lecturer in me is coming out. By this, I mean that we should examine the regime from an introspective reflection. Are we doing this because we believe it is the right thing to do? And will it produce the best results or consequences? On this score, we have to conceptualize anti-corruption legal concepts in a fundamental manner. That is, a review of the historical, philosophical, linguistic, economic, social, and political implications of law. Only then will the anti-corruption quest have real meaning as being firmly secured by law. This is because what may work in other jurisdictions may spectacularly fail here, and what may amount to corruption in other parts of the world may not necessarily fit in our worldview. All I'm stating is this: we must link our laws empirically to the facts of our lives. This is because the development of law is not just a construct intended to guide human conduct. There is a larger objective for formulating law and viewing it essentially as a drive from its evolution to its future direction as a tool for social change. So, Professor, a great starting point should be the reckoning that gift giving is ritualistic in our society. It is always difficult to distinguish between the lawful and the unlawful when it comes to gift giving in Ghana. And so when a bystander lends a hand to assist you to lift the side of your vehicle that is hanging over a gutter, he expects you to show appreciation by giving him a token cash sum. Well, these days, the bystander will actually demand the cash and may probably verbally abuse you if it does not forthcome. It didn't used to be the case, but now that is it. Professor, as you are reviewing the Constitution, it should also occur to you that in some of our traditions, and as recognized by our courts, where a person is gifted valuable property by a donor during the lifetime of the donee is expected to present a symbolic gift as aseda in acceptance of the gift. Who does that? We do that in Ghana. It's perfectly acceptable and it's been blessed by the cause. Indeed, the absence of the symbolic gift in acceptance of the valuable property may, in some cases, render the gift ineffective and be subject to contention. If you were indeed gifted this by your grandfather during his lifetime, did you present aseda? Ritualistic gift giving. Then again, in some of our traditions, a notification of bereavement. You are notifying an important person and inviting that person to the impending funeral. Sometimes you are required, if you are smart enough, to accompany the notification of the bereavement and the invitation to this important person, schnapps and a symbolic cash sum. This signifies several things. For instance, it may signify the premium you place on your departed relative. It may also signify that the person you are informing of the bereavement and inviting to the funeral is highly regarded by you and your family, as well as an indication of the funeral donation you expect from the invited person. So you give the snap, you put a custom on it, it is a notice to the person you are informing and inviting to the funeral. Do as I have done in multiples. This is our society. All I'm saying is that our society is one of promise for promise, gift for gift, give and take, and live and let live. This should guide our anti-corruption constructs, not what the white man tells us. Further, we must always be quick to realize that the world is run on self-interest as we formulate our laws. Each one of us sitting here silently reflects on the question of what is in it for me when you are engaged in whatever vocation or activity you find yourself in. It is the desire for self-preservation. It is natural. It is also the desire for self-enhancement. These drive our actions. Situate this in the craft of statehood. Often, the interests of the populace get lost in translation and are sacrificed, as opposed to the interests of the main actors whose opinions and actions dramatically shape the course of the state, whether for beauty or for debasement. There is always this old subtle trick in statehood. The main actors make believe that the good of the populace is so dear to them. They are always quick to tell and remind the populace that they have their best interests at heart. For the most part, this trick works, especially when the population is indoctrinated enough. Chinua Achebe summed this up so well in A Man of the People, a novel which he really captured happenings in society. Professor, I will attempt to illustrate my point with the biblical trial and execution of Jesus. Do not get me wrong. I am not trying to preach. I am the least qualified to. But 4 characters deserve mention as I bring things down. First, Judas. He has been vilified enough in history, and his name has gone down in infamy. Indeed, his name is a synonym for traitor. Maybe he deserved it. However, I see things differently. His actions tell me a very different story from what the Gospels portray him to be. I do not think he set out to betray Jesus at all. To me, he was just a con artist who set out to defraud the high priests and cash in a handsome amount. The man had been with Jesus for a considerable time, and he witnessed the spectacular miracles recounted in the Bible. He probably never at any moment thought that Jesus was amenable to capture. It was more probable than not that he thought Jesus would vanish and escape any attempt to capture him. Think about it this way. After all, Jesus had previously inexplicably escaped the throng of people who were desirous of throwing him over a cliff. He simply walked through and away from them, the Bible recounts. Therefore, in the estimation of Judas, Jesus would escape again, and he will get to keep his small fee just for revealing Jesus' whereabouts to the authorities. Just that, I will do. So his interest was very simple: getting paid, not betrayal. Next, the high priest. All in the context of statehood. Their interest was clear enough. Jesus was bad for their business. They were losing their audience to this upstart who was pulling crowds and claiming to be the Son of God. They feared that it was only a matter of time their synagogues would be emptied of the faithful and they would lose their perch as the very respected and influential spiritual leaders. So, better to contrive charges against him and have him taken away from the scene permanently. Now, let us call up Pilate. He was the governor of the Roman province of Judea at the time. The Gospels appear to portray him as a reluctant judge who pronounced the death sentence on Jesus. However, for a man whose contemporaries described him as prone to unnecessary violence and brutality, his dramatic public washing of his hands to signify a lack of responsibility for the killing of Jesus belied his real interest. It was simple. He was saving his own skin and ingratiating himself to his boss, Tiberius Caesar. This is because Judea was extremely volatile at the time and characterized by violent protests and unrest. Pilate's high handling of affairs had not gone unnoticed in Rome. Therefore, the Jesus trial and execution provided him with a wonderful opportunity to appease the people, 1, and their leaders, 2, and not to attract unpleasant sanctions from Rome, 3. That is all it meant for him. Finally, the people, still in the context of statehood. What was their interest? Those who were screaming, "Crucify him, crucify him." It appears difficult to apprehend even to this day. Yet, they were still screaming and calling for the execution of the man and for the freeing of an accomplished criminal on top. In the scheme of affairs, consider it this way. Judas satisfied his interest, albeit with unintended disastrous consequences as his con game went seriously awry. Next, the interest of the high priest was very served. Jesus was permanently taken off the scene, and they regained their influence and respect among the people. Pilate also served his interest very well. Tiberius Caesar left him to his designs for a while. What about the people? My interest. It will appear that the trial and execution of Jesus served them no useful purpose. So the old statehood trick really worked well and served the main actors satisfactorily and left the people with nothing. Professor, this is my point. There is sound force in the reckoning that there is no objective way of doing things or attaining heights from an individual perspective. Consequently, societal interest must remain supreme. In the end, our collective good is worth the fight against corruption, and we must always guard against the tendency of personal interest overriding the common will. The mantra should be, our collective ailment, our collective solution. On the back of the foregoing, I call for the following, still directed at the professor. First, we must write the office of the special prosecutor into the Constitution and board it up firmly. Please do not dwell on me. Leave me out of the equation. I'm just one person, obviously. My tenure will end at some point, and like everyone else, I will leave the scene. I say so because my experience has been that the OSP is being increasingly equated to me. It is as if I'm the office, and the office is me. Sometimes it feels as if the fight against corruption is solely my concern. I dare say that personalized spotlighting is without any utility. So leave me out of the equation. The focus should be on building institutions that stand the test of time. From my experience, the OSP represents our best bet in fighting corruption. Its present attributes, mandate, powers, and reach afford it a pole position as the foremost and focal institution in tackling the problem. However, the OSP does need a lot of tweaking, though, to render it fully fit for purpose. Its independence must be fully assured, and its powers and mandate should be enlarged and enhanced. The job is daunting. We must be fully kitted for it. Therefore, the quest should be an entrenchment of the fight against corruption in the Constitution, a retrofitting and full equipment and insulation of the foremost anti-corruption law enforcement institution from political marginalization and reprisals. Second, we've gone over this, it's become an overbeaten path, but we need it. We must enact a comprehensive Corrupt Practices Act to frontally address all forms of corruption and corruption-related activities. This will afford us the opportunity to clearly and concisely set out what we mean by corruption and corruption-related offenses. The present formulation under Section 79 of Act 959 is unhelpful and circuitous. It engenders confusion. It is symptomatic of our penchant for crafting criminal legislation in a very arcane and runabout fashion instead of simply stating what we mean to say, which then festers the decades of debate as to what act, if at all, has been criminalized. Let me share an example. In Section 104 of the Criminal Offences Act 1960, Act 29, instead of simply stating and describing the sexual acts we were prohibiting, we chose to say that we were prohibiting unnatural carnal knowledge. We then proceeded to define unnatural carnal knowledge in the most unhelpful manner by stating that unnatural carnal knowledge is sexual intercourse with a person in an unnatural manner or with an animal. Sexual intercourse with an animal is straightforward. However, what does it mean to say sexual intercourse with a person in an unnatural manner? So it requires you to know what sexual intercourse in a natural manner is. Breaking news. We did not define sexual intercourse in a natural manner. Go figure it out yourself. You should be able to. Don't ask me. I don't know. But that is what we do to ourselves. Why adopt such a formulation when we can simply describe the act? Similar thing we have done with the definition of corruption and corruption-related offenses. Even me, a special prosecutor, I don't know. It's confusing. Because you have to go about and figure and tear things out just to decipher what this code means. We selected 10 sections from Act 29 and one subsection from the Public Procurement Act. Then it seems when we did that, we got tired because we then proceeded to throw in a blanket provision, my query is coming, which refers to existent offenses under enactments arising out of or consequent to offenses to the selected offenses. This is what you have as corruption and corruption-related offenses. What does it mean? Don't ask me. We're still trying to figure it out. This is inelegant and unclear. It's unhelpful. We are stultifying ourselves with these preventable shortcomings in our formulation of laws and the legal fictions we employ to prop up legal principles in a seemingly unsuccessful attempt to give them a semblance of validity. We will do ourselves a world of good if we state out clearly and in simple terms the acts and conduct we are prohibiting. On this score, we must forcefully address unexplained wealth, not only among public officers, but also private persons with biting lifestyle auditing. Then again, we must highlight the vexed question of the opacity attending political party financing and the monetization of public elections. This will surely change the narrative. Third, we must set up specialized anti-corruption courts, manned by especially trained judges in the field to swiftly and efficiently deal with corruption cases. Related to this, we must, in practice, not just as written in the Constitution, assure the independence of the judiciary and fortify in it a culture of the defense of truth and the reward of integrity. Justice, fundamental to any thriving society, cannot flourish in the context of corruption. The scales of justice should remain untainted if the fight against corruption is to attain any notable result. Professor, corruption itself is curtailed through justice, and the absence of justice begets corruption. It is much like light and darkness. The brighter justice shines, the dimmer corruption gets. On this score, I also call for the establishment in our schools, at the basic and secondary levels, curricula in anti-corruption studies intended at instilling an unyielding commitment to combating corruption at every level. All I have said can be summed up in just a sentence. We must channel our anti-corruption laws as a construct for national development. End credits. More good men needed. Now we are back from the flashback. I already told you my conclusion right at the outset, and I said I was going to work my way back to the conclusion. So now we are back from the flashback. Permit me to restate my purpose. I call for constitutional reformation and a reimagination of our collective mindsets to meaningfully tackle down corruption and state capture in aid of national development. 4, it is upon the fight against corruption that we may forge ourselves decent existence. Perhaps I know how to assure my own integrity, but I do not know how to assure personal integrity in others beyond a plea to good sense, a plea to morality, and a plea to fairness. And this is all I have tried to do in this address. A lot more good men should join the fight. The nation needs you. Esum ye druyen. Umaye nyina nsumubi. Thank you.
This corruption or corruption. They've just corrupted the mic. But no, I think we've gone through a lesson on corruption, the Bible and betrayal, Judas, the culture of gift giving, and the role of the Constitution. And there's a dare on the chairman and prof sitting before us. I think Kissi Agyebeng, the special prosecutor, deserves another round of applause from us. Thank you. And the literal nature in which, as a student of literature, I was excited you started with a flashback. It all came together at the end, even though it started from the beginning. Thank you so much, sir. Let me acknowledge a few people who've been with us here. I've not acknowledged them in the beginning. Daniel Macaulay is chairman of the Magdan Group of Companies. He's here with us. Numo, please give us a wave. Thank you so much. Ben Boachi is with ASEP, sitting here with us. Thank you, Ben. Samson Ladi Ayenini is a member of One Ghana movement. He was a journalist, now he's a lawyer. Albert Kwashiga is head of department, public law at the UPSA Law School. He was a journalist, now he's a lawyer. And because of that, I'm at the Ghana Law School. I'm worried for journalism. It seems we are all leaving. We wish journalism all the best, which is a fourth estate that Kissi Agyebeng really needs. So I don't know what's going to happen. Let me also acknowledge our sponsors. Alisa Hotel, thank you so much for hosting us today. Viba Insurance Brokers for doing this beautiful work with us. And the Magdan Group of Companies, which has decided to send its chairman to come and support us as well. Thank you so much for supporting us today. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to do a review of the lecture. And since there's been a direct call on the professor chairman, I think it's good to hear from him. Prof. H. Kwesi Prempeh is with CDD, but he's chairman of yet another attempt to review our constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, let's invite him. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Umara. Good evening, and thank you for including me on this program. I think my good friend Kissi Agyebeng is correct when he says that this is indeed a job he never sought and never lobbied for. And I think it is clear from his presentation that taking him from some other vocation or profession, just like Umaru Sanda said. I mean, when I read this, I was very attracted by the literary quality of the work. It reads very well. I didn't know he had such flair for language and almost poetic in the way of his expression. So clearly this man is a man of many parts, could have done something else with his life, could have become our Chinua Achebe. We haven't produced one at that level yet, globally, certainly not in contemporary times. And unfortunately or fortunately, he gave up all of that prospect to come and take what has become for him a thankless job. I find it actually quite fascinating that he managed in the end to kick this ball right into my court as the current, the chair of this current exercise at Constitutional Review. Now I say that because in 2017, I was among a few persons, the late Akoto Ampao being one of them, who were called upon by the then Attorney General Gloria Kufu to assist her to work on this idea of an Office of Special Prosecutor, to help conceptualize it, put an outline to it, prepare something that could be used legislatively for her advice. So we did quite a bit of comparative research, wrote a few memos for her attention, and helped somewhat with the drafting. And I remember that we went even to Koforidia, what was it, Capital something Hotel, with the Committee on Constitutional and Legal Affairs, working on the draft from the Legislative Division, trying to get this into law. And we did it with very high hopes that by trying to parcel from the Attorney General's power, trying to carve out of that a very small bit of that power that would be then delegated to or assigned to a special prosecutor, that we were going to be dealing with this problem of an Attorney General who was a politician and therefore was almost naturally conflicted out when it came to dealing with politically exposed persons. So we're very hopeful that this would work. In the course of time, I have to admit that I have become one of those skeptics about the utility of our efforts. I haven't necessarily publicly advocated the abolition of the office. Maybe I have. Sometimes I forget what I've said publicly. But I have become probably just as frustrated as the incumbent holder of that office in the various ways and means we have devised to make that office not work. So he now kicks it to me and my committee to solve the problem, right? I thought we were designing that office to solve a problem that could not entirely be solved within the four walls of the Constitution. And now, very cleverly, he makes me the person responsible somehow with my committee for finding some room in the Constitution to solve this problem. I think the call he makes is a very urgent and dire one. I think he's made a very strong case for why, if we haven't sat up, that we should begin to sit up. Esumnua he's talking about is not something in the distant future. It is right here, almost in a literal way, right? When you drive through the streets of Accra in the night, I don't know about you, there are almost no lights. No lights. Very dark. In the day, it's filthy. In the nights, they're very dark. It's not just Accra. These are all resource questions. Right? Simply resource questions. You travel some of the capital cities in our neighborhood. We don't like to admit this, but you should visit our neighborhoods. Don't go far. You can start from Dakar and maybe just stop at. Don't even go to Lagos. You can stop at Cotonou these days. In the night, you can see. You can see. You can drive through the cities and you see. Right? We have for too long punched below our weight as a country. That much is fact. Right? We enjoy a lot of goodwill. We have enjoyed a lot of goodwill from the years of independence. Strangely, despite our disappointment, we continue to enjoy a lot of goodwill. So, like I like to say, the Ghana brand is still very strong. What is left is for the product to match the brand. And the product continues to fail. Many who come to our shores to taste the product for the first time, attracted to these parts by the strength of the brand, increasingly go away disappointed. Is that it? This is it? Accra? That's Accra? I have had friends who visited Ghana for the first time tell me this, to my shame. So the call is an urgent one, and I like the subtitle, In Aid of Development. We must do this in aid of development. But I would add, not just in aid of development, but also in aid of our democracy. Because it is indeed, we are somewhat putting it at risk. If we continue to change government, if we continue to do regime change through the ballot box, which is a great thing because we never used to be able to do that in the past, we have become experts at doing that these days. Countries come to us to study how we do this beautiful transfer of power and all of that. You know, everybody's laughing. And yet, how we manage to govern so badly in the period after elections. And when you have choiceless elections, when citizens do not believe that changing the baton makes a difference, when they begin to despair that the only people who profit from democracy are those who manage to enter the political class, those who get appointed to offices, they are the ones who are experiencing a transformation in their lives. Very few others are. If we continue to play that game, sooner than later, I think, too many of the people will despair and will give up on democracy. That is very clear. Democracy is going through very troubled times globally, even in those countries that were once seen as the paragons of democracy and the rule of law. So I think the call he makes is a very urgent one. We must do it because we are falling too far behind the development ladder. Ghana is not looking good. I went to Kumasi just this past weekend. I almost never fly. I've only gone by air to Kumasi once in my lifetime. It was probably paid for by somebody. On my own, I always drive. And it's a tortuous journey. Right? It is just, these are the two largest cities, right, in the country. And that is what links the two of them. Not too long ago, I did a similar journey on the other side, on the coastal side, going for a funeral somewhere in the Brakwa area in the central region. This is the link between Accra and where we send our visitors who come. 30 December, wherever. We send them there to see the forts and all the slave tourism. Don't we feel shame? How we travel that distance and the risk to our lives. I mean, this is not right. Right? So when he calls us to really do this for ourselves in aid of our development, he couldn't be more right. This is 2025, for goodness sake. And Ghana is not looking good. But the urgency, I think, is also drawn home by the fact that we are in the throes of a sovereign bankruptcy. In spite of all of the resources that God, nature has gifted us, we have borrowed to a point of bankruptcy. And it does not reflect, right? The scale of the borrowing does not even reflect in what we see on the ground. So we're in a very desperate position now. Where are we going to find the resources? Trump has made good on his threats. The first time around, he just called us a shithole. That was undignifying enough, right? That was bad enough for many of us who feel shame. Now it's not just a shithole. He says he's not going to open his purse strings to finance your health, any portion of your health bill. The USAID is going to go kaput. Now he says even the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. You know, the US used to have this law. If you're an American company, you were by US law, prohibited from using bribery and corruption to win contracts abroad. He says, he's going to do away with that. Why do we have to help these countries that are corrupt already to fight corruption? So he's going to take care of that too. In other words, as every other country looks inward, increasingly countries in our part of the world are going to be on our own. So the call is urgent, right? And there are too many reasons, I believe, why we should heed that call and do so now. So I think the points it's made are really very critical. I take exception with a certain portion of it, and I'll get to it. But I think what he has painted is a picture of a country where what has to be high-risk behavior or high-risk venture is actually the one that is low-risk, and what has to be low-risk is the one that we have made into a high-risk venture. So fighting corruption has become a very high-risk venture in Ghana, while corruption has become a low-risk enterprise. How exactly you fight corruption when you have this imbalance, when the fight itself is high risk, but the behavior you are fighting is low risk, you are certainly going to produce more of the bad behavior you want to fight and very little of the high risk behavior. So I think he makes again a call for us to reverse this order. There's no way you can fight corruption when the cost of fighting it is greater to the person fighting it, to the institutions fighting it, than the corrupt conduct itself, right? So the way to go about the essential plea he's making, let's make corruption the high risk activity and spare him and its officers at the OSP the risk to their reputation, sometimes to their lives, that come from trying to stand as the one who is fighting corruption. He also tried to allude to the ways in which perhaps we should re-examine some of our norms as a society. And that is a very famous, it's a very common way in which we talk about the corruption story. So you usually hear references to our gift-giving culture. It's like hospitality, right? We're not the only gift-giving culture in the world, right? I think that showing appreciation for acts of benevolence done to us by other people is actually something unexceptional. Most cultures do that. Most cultures do that. They expect that the person who benefits from an act of benevolence or charity would express in one form or the other some form of gratitude. And in fact, within the traditional cultural setting, where we see these acts enacted, so well, if you went to the chief's palace, you can't go there without anything and all of that. True, but I do not think that culturally that is where the cultural roots of corruption lie. Right? Because those acts are done transparently. We all know about it. It's a rule. It's a rule of conduct. We all know that when you go to the chief's palace, this is the protocol. It's like the price of admission, right? It could be like the filing fee you pay at a public office, right? To get forms to do certain things. There are other ways other analogies we can apply to contemporize that act we perform when we go into the chief's palace to plead our case. Somehow, these are where we derive our norms around corruption. But I do think that there is indeed a cultural aspect to it, but it may not be the cultural, the ritualistic, traditional culture we're talking about. Maybe it's more a certain political culture that we're talking about. And I think we are all grown to see a creeping normalization of certain practices and acts that amount to a gross distortion of our values as a society and have ended up more or less normalizing corruption in our contemporary life. So you take something that, and we usually use words to conceal the immorality of the act. We call it protocol, for example. What is protocol? It has come to signify all manner of things, a catch-all phrase for somehow getting to enjoy a scarce public benefit through the beneficence of a patron who has access, privileged access by virtue of his office or power to the distribution of this benefit. So protocol has become the counter-meritocratic way of getting something that all of us as citizens should be able to compete for on a somewhat meritocratic basis. But because one other person, and not you, is the one that has privileged access to the patron or to the distributor of that largesse, somehow they get the protocol and you don't. What is it? It is the use of public office for private gain, to distribute certain scarce resources for the benefit of the public co-partisans, and the like. We have normalized. So that now we can even should protocol be 10% or 15%? Maybe reserve 20% for protocol. What is it? Right? It's corruption. And we should call it like that. There are many other things we have begun to do in our politics. This party-first ideology. The idea that when you win power, your first obligation is to use public resources, starting with public office, to benefit your co-partisans, right? So that in our democratic contest, the winner of the election wins the spoils of office, and therefore is entitled to distribute those resources in a manner that favors his or her co-partisans or their co-partisans. And there is an expectation and an entitlement on the part of the co-partisans that indeed that will be done. And so the party, which should be policy making, is now turned into a mutual benefit society that puts itself above the nation and above the nation's interest in the distribution of public goods and services. Sometimes even to the point where public, even like roads, even things that are public goods. Sometimes you don't understand why something is going around your house and it doesn't quite get there, then it goes next door. Even roads and streets in the neighborhood sometimes are diverted in that direction. So these are certain things that are taking root in our politics that is leading to the legitimization and normalization of corruption, because they have become accepted practice across the political spectrum. Another one, what is in a public office for? Why is it that when your party wins power and you don't get a certain public office, right? If public office was for public service, some of the ways in which we clamor for public, my cheese also following from the old man. We expect public office to be used. And you can go on social media. This one didn't get this office right. It's not. You deserve better. Better for what? For service or for self-service? Right? So it's clear that, and I don't know, both from the position of the appointing authority, perhaps, and also from the position of the appointee, but certainly from the position of the public office is a ticket to self-enrichment. So we rank them based on which one is juicier, and which ones are loaded with more contracting opportunities, more job opportunities. That's how we have come to look at these things. So when Kissi Agyebeng is talking about the people and the role we play in this, it is how we have legitimized. By these behaviors, we have come to legitimize these kinds of things. And they are taking deeper and deeper roots in our politics. Which is why probably he thinks that it will take constitutional review to change it. Because really what we use constitutions for, one of the things we use constitutions for, is to do what everyday politics will not do, or cannot do easily. Right? So if the political class is not sufficiently incentivized to act on something, or if they are likely to act on it in perverse ways, that sort of thing is a good candidate for putting in the Constitution. So I can understand why he's talking about this way. Then there is, when you attempt to fight the corruption, he talks about this contradiction. We want to fight corruption, but we don't. Elsewhere, this is called the legal done about a problem. But the moment it gets close to your backyard, you protest. So you don't want it done to you or to anybody closely related to you, but you want it done to the other side, to your rivals. And that is how we have come to see corruption. So when the Office of Special Prosecutor was set up, I think some of the initial resistance was, the expectation was that, it's going to be used against whoever then was in the opposition. So when Kissi Agyebeng started then to step on certain tools, then the calls for either his removal or the disbandment of the office and the like then began to come from him. Right? So we expect that it is the other person who will pay the price for corruption, but not anybody close to us. That is indeed a big challenge. If you are confronted within a political culture with this sentiment, then how do you fight corruption? I'm happy that he mentioned among the areas he thinks we should look at political party financing and campaign financing. And in fact, in the work that previous work we have done at CDD, this is stuff that even in the political class, there's a great deal of demand from within the political class for something to be done about this, about the cost of politics. And in one of the sessions, working sessions that we had with politicians at CDD, we had a working group on campaign finance. A very interesting point was made that we should find a way to make, for example, vote buying not just a high-risk proposition for the buyer, but also for the seller of the vote. Right? But we tend to think of it as something that the politicians do. It's like a one-way traffic. And I think that, if you're an ingenious legal drafter, certainly should be able to make both ends of the transaction punishable. Right? And that idea came from a politician. He says, look, if you guys just try to tie our hands, but you don't put any liability, criminal liability on the other side, this won't work. It's a brilliant idea, right? To the extent that Kissi Agyebeng is calling for an enactment of a new Corrupt Practices Act. And in fact, it is long overdue. There is no way you can be fighting corruption in 2025 with an act that was passed in 1960. It's a disgrace that too many of the things in our Criminal Offences Act date back to the 1960s. How so? Why? Nothing has happened. There's been a lot of legal innovation, jurisprudential innovation around fighting corruption since then. Plenty. In the countries that believe the most in democracy and the rule of law, a lot has changed about fighting corruption. Changing presumptions, even to the point of putting the presumption of guilt sometimes on the accused person to turn it around. We have non-conviction based forfeiture laws in many countries. In the Northern Hemisphere, in the democratic West, where you can actually go against an asset, proceed legally against an asset or a property in an in-rem action, where you might find it difficult to proceed against the person in an in personam action, right? And millions and millions of dollars of assets have been confiscated that way, including in Nigeria. They do those things. Our laws are too old. The tools we're giving the fighters of corruption are way too archaic. He's spoken about the way we draft our laws. Plain English. That's the way to go these days. Plain English. No need for arcane stuff. That does two things. When you draft laws, they must inform the person whose behavior you want to modify, so that without even recourse to a lawyer, The average person reads it and says, oh, but I can't do this. Right? It must not take a lawyer going to a judge for interpretation before you know that the conduct you're engaged in is actually the conduct that the piece of criminal legislation intended to criminalize. In some jurisdictions, a law like that doesn't put you on notice as to what it is that is criminalized, will be thrown out of court for void. I mean, it would be thrown out on a doctrine called, on the vagueness doctrine, or they'll call it, is void for vagueness. You cannot criminalize somebody when the behavior you are criminalizing is not known, plainly known to that person. We should draft laws that make sense on the face, right? He's talked about unexplained wealth laws. That's not an idea coming from the Office of Special Prosecutor or from Ghana. Unexplained laws are all over the place now, in developed countries, in democracies, in countries that take rule of law seriously. And in fact, the principle is already in our Constitution. So I'll get to answer some of his points about what we should do with the Constitution. The Constitution already gives a positive nod on the anti-corruption side through many provisions. Let's look at Article 286 and the chapter of Code of Conduct for Public Officers, chapter 24. There is Article 286, section 4. Any property or assets acquired by a public officer after the initial declaration required by clause 1 of this article, and which is not reasonably attributable to income, gift, loan, inheritance, or any other reasonable source, shall be deemed to have been acquired in contravention of this Constitution. What does it mean? It means that once you have declared your assets, whatever additional assets your next declaration shows or some investigation reveals, if you cannot explain the source of that increment in your net worth, if it's not coming from your known income, if you do not show that you've gotten any inheritance, if it was not gifted to you in a way that you can document and prove, we are going to assume. So the Constitution itself, embedded in it, is a presumption that wealth that cannot be explained is presumed to be illicitly gotten. So proceeding from that presumption, we indeed can enact unexplained wealth laws because the Constitution itself accepts the principle, right? So there are indeed ways in which in the Constitution, that important principle that we find in most countries these days, not in most countries, but in many countries these days, that are serious about fighting corruption, that principle is here, shall be deemed to have been acquired in contravention of this Constitution. So if you cannot explain this growth in your net worth over time, the presumption is against you that you acquired it illegally. That's all an unexplained law does. And I think that there is indeed a basis in our Constitution, if we are serious about enacting a new Corrupt Practices Act, to attach an unexplained wealth law to it. He makes other proposals for the attention of the committee that is looking at the constitutional review, one of which I think the premier one is to roll the Office of Special Prosecutor into the Constitution. Well, I think, one strong case for that is that it allays any doubts as to the constitutionality of the office, right? Because there are some who continue to believe that in the face of Article 88, the provision on the Attorney General, that the idea of an independent prosecutor is not constitutionally sustainable. So maybe this is not a question that the court has answered yet. It has answered some other aspects of the constitutional question. So he says, well, then let's constitutionalize the office. And indeed, it is not an extraordinary request. In a growing number of countries, including in Africa, the prosecutorial power is taken away from a politician attorney general. So where you have career attorneys general, remember that's where we started. At independence, we had career attorneys general, right? Jeffrey Bing was a career attorney general, subsequent attorney general, and then at some point we changed it. Where you have a career attorney general who handles prosecution, that's fine. But where you have a politician attorney general, the idea of your colleague politician leading prosecution, going to court, and that person could actually have contested you in the last election. Imagine that, right? Because we don't put boundaries around what an attorney general could be. It could be an MP, attorney general, or it could be just a minister. But we don't have any boundaries around it. So you could actually find the person you contested in the last election who feels some time, but that doesn't say anything. What does time mean? Do I have 5 minutes or do I have 2? I get your point, right? So I think that the case for that can be made, right? And it's possible. We have an anti-corruption body in the Constitution. Unfortunately, it is saddled with other functions. It's a 3-in-1 office. Maybe we could create from scratch a prosecutorial division or something, and donate the powers that are in the OSP to that body, and then maybe allow that office to do the prosecution of politically exposed persons and all of that. So I think that there is indeed good merit. Kenya has tried to do that. The Attorney General in Kenya does not prosecute at all. There's a Director of Public Prosecution that now prosecutes all criminal cases, and that is a constitutionally independent office who has to be appointed with the approval of Parliament and that kind of stuff. So there are a number of countries in moving that direction. Sierra Leone has a SHRAC type body that also has prosecutorial power. So there are models out there we could look at. So on the whole, I don't find much about his speech that I disagree with. The one thing I am uncomfortable, and when I saw it in the title, A Few Good Men, and I think which also kept running through the lecture, is probably an implicit suggestion, maybe I'm wrong, that the way to really get a hold of this problem is through a fight about morality. That this is a fight about morality. Now, I have always been worried about corruption waged as a moral crusade. Not that I do not believe that there is a moral content to the problem, but I think that given scarcity of resources, if you are going to fight corruption from the moral side, if it is going to be about growing the number of good men and women, then it is going to be a very tall order. Why do I say that? I think corruption, like any crime, happens when two things meet. When motive meets opportunity, right? Motive comes from many different, in our system, it could come from economic insecurity, right? People, you are in the public office or you are in the private place, you are getting close to 60, you haven't finished your project, as they call it. That is also the age when you have become more senior at your job. You have 5 years to go. So the presence of economic insecurity, post-retirement insecurity, is something that we need to think about seriously. So yes, that might give you a motive. On the need side, it might give you a motive to be corrupt. But notwithstanding that motive, there is no opportunity corruption would not happen. So no matter how many units of need you have, if M, the motive, times O, opportunity, if opportunity is 0, no matter how high your M, the product is still M times 0 equals 0, right? So you cannot, if you leave your house today intending to pickpocket in Makola, you have the motive. But if everybody guarded their pockets and their wallets and their purses on that day, you will come back home very furious because you will not have achieved your goal. So motive needs opportunity for a crime to occur, for corruption to happen. In our system, motive is plentiful. As everywhere, human nature, motive is plentiful. Need is one, greed is another. Sometimes greed, even your values, the values in the society push you, right? So greed could also actually give you the motive. In a system that rewards corrupt people and that actually vilifies the upright, you might have a motive to be corrupt. But again, so I don't say that the motive side is not important, that the moral side is not important. It is. But given scarce resources, I think that an office of special prosecutor, any government institution, should be designed around making sure that the opportunities for corruption are reduced. Right? And so my equation, the famous equation for corruption, C equals M times O, where M is the motive and O is the opportunity, and all of that divided by S, which is the sanction, right? This is where the office of special prosecutor is. It's in the sanction area, but also in the opportunity area, because if you do the sanctioning well, it will reduce the opportunity. The need, we can leave it for now. Maybe the economy improves, maybe we do something, maybe Christ comes, or the churches take it upon themselves and get serious about morality. Maybe we can do something about M. But I think if we have to wait for a few good men and women, the enterprise of fighting corruption is going to be very difficult. So I would actually say that in our system, the reason why corruption is so huge in scale, it's not just because the motive or the M is there. It is everywhere globally. It is because on top of this M, the opportunity for corruption is so vast and ample, and the sanctions so weak and non-existent, that it is bound to be on the scale we are seeing. So we should spend more time on trying to unravel this opportunity problem. Some who have studied this have said, well, the opportunity is high partly because discretion is very high. It's true. When you read the laws of Ghana, you think, this is a very interesting country. Why give any public office holder so much discretion? So you say, okay, we must do the oil allocation, block allocation by competitive bidding. However, the minister, in his discretion. Wow. So what's the minister going to do? Discretion. Right? And in our system, discretion means license. You can just do whatever you like. Say, oh, but I have discretion. So you undermine the law that you have passed to encourage transparent, accountable, competitive, meritocratic allocation of a resource by giving discretion in the exception to the public office holder. We do it in our procurement laws. You say, oh, you should do competitive bidding, but however, sole sourcing. And then we undermine it. So discretion creates ample opportunity for corruption. It makes the O go up infinitely high. You're not going to fight corruption in the natural resource sector by passing a law like that. No. And that is why the Constitution framers in their wisdom also put Article 296 there. But we have almost read it out of the Constitution. It says, whoever makes a decision, it cannot be capricious. What does it mean? It means we must know the reasons for why you make certain decisions. Publish the reasons. Let us see how you make it. Let us be transparent. So there are some tools in the Constitution, even as we find it today, right? The Constitution is not perfect. No Constitution can ever be, but it does have something. Something's in there that can be the basis of a very credible fight against corruption. But I think our legal institutions, including our legal doctrines, are way too archaic for the times. We must embrace a lot of legal innovation, including some of the ideas that Kissi Agyebeng has put forth. Right? We must embrace a lot of legal innovation because corruption mutates from day to day. When you are in a developed country, the laws are changing all the time to catch up with corrupt behavior. We are relying on the 1962 to do the fight. It is not fit for purpose, right? So I commend my brother for really this wonderful lecture, and he of course invites our sympathy. He feels like a guy who believes in the guy is dressed like some funky guy. He wants to have a cool life. Here you are, you say you should go and fight corruption, and now you don't want him to do the job too. But I think there are ways in which we can do it. I don't think constitutional review is a silver bullet. I think every one of the efforts we have to review the Constitution, to plug holes, to enhance particular institutions, I think we must take that opportunity. I happen to believe our Constitution is too permissive. It's not sufficiently regulatory. It assumes almost that the system is going to be worked by angels. No system is going to be worked by angels. So we must actually, without assuming that anybody is going to be an angel, that's how you write a good Constitution. Assume the worst. That you are not going to get angels, that they're going to be mere mortals who have a lot of to do bad things for self-interested reason. And then it is for you then to narrow the opportunities for that to happen, to increase the sanctions, to make sure that these things don't actually fester. So I think that is, for me, the nature of the project that is before us. And I think we should all join together to make this work. Darkness has befallen us already. It is not about to befall us. It has befallen us already. The time to act is now. Thank you.
I think we can give it up to Prof again. Thank you so much. Prof, I have a confession to make. I see you're looking for your chair, so I have a confession. So while you were speaking, the latest interrogator in town came around, and I don't know how to dance my local dance. I was scared. I dreaded he may ask me to do it. So I said, please sit in the chairman's seat, and that's why I put him there. Honorable, you're welcome. And so thank you so much, Prof. H. Kwesi Prempeh there. C, I don't like mathematics, but this one I can calculate. C is equal to M times opportunity, or O, over S. Thank you so much. And it says corruption is high because of a vast opportunity for same. Let's spend more time on the opportunity, and the issue of discretion is a bigger problem. The plan for this program, and of course, for those who are watching us live on Channel 1 TV, on CTFM, we are also live on Joy News and a number of other media platforms. We're live on the One Ghana Movement platform. We are grateful that you've been through with us. We've had a lecture from Kissi Agyebeng, the special prosecutor, the review done by Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh. The design of the program today is to also have guest reviewers aside the main reviewer. Now, we purposely decided to let the two leaders of the two sides of Parliament do that for us. We have one of them in our midst. He arrived a short while ago because Parliament was doing one or two things. You know how they do it these days. I'm not going to say it so that they drag me in for contempt. So, but he managed to squeeze time to join us here. So, ladies and gentlemen, for our guest reviewer, the Honorable Futu Member of Parliament, Minority Leader, the Honorable Alexander Afenyo-Markins. Please. People wanted you to do the Akpi dance, but they...
evening to you all. I see the room packed. We have our professors, our police chiefs, all important personalities in the country have found their way into this important chamber because of the subject matter. I've had the benefit of reading what my respected brother and senior at the bar, Kissi Agyebeng, has shared with you. And I would attempt to add my voice by way of review to some of the issues that he raised. Indeed, he was spot on the issues he raised, particularly the legal reforms, constitutional reforms of our body politics and the laws that allows us to punish for corruption. But my question is very simple. Do we often narrow the issue of corruption and limit it to the political class, or perhaps we have to broaden it and look at it as part of the general life of all of us as a people? When a government is elected into office, its core function is to do business. To do business with who? The citizens. When I was in opposition 2013 to 2016, I often had businessmen sharing documents with me. And they will encourage you to speak about it on radio, corruption. But later on in life, when I understood how dark Accra was, I realized that those who don't get their contract through are the ones who complain of corruption. But those who get theirs through, they go to church in white and thank God. I've also had the opportunity of seeing former legislators, former ministers of state. And believe me when I tell you that some of them, when you see them, you ask, was he really in public life? Was this not a man that we thought he was so rich? So what happened to his money? I'm not here to hold brief for any politician, but you know them in your neighborhood. Perhaps the very few politicians who are entrepreneurs, who have practiced their profession, are the ones that you see them surviving. But many politicians, contrary to the view that they are so corrupt, are very poor. Especially legislators. You can see them after office and you would wonder. I believe that we can act collective and be very fair to the issues. In my constituency, when a chief visits me, the chief is not interested in my salary. He expects that as he is come, he must not go empty-handed. A constituent visits me, a pastor visits me, he expects that I should do something. So perhaps the demands of the office may cause a politician to be finding out how to survive or how to look for resources to meet a certain purpose. As part of our culture, don't we make ourselves vulnerable for what we say corruption? Because our cultural lifestyle, how we relate to ourselves in itself, makes the leader very vulnerable. And in so saying, the leader then would have to find a way of meeting that expectation. And in the process, if you don't have it on your own, or in your quest to make somebody happy, you end up acting wrongly. And that is a fact. I therefore encourage discussions by civil society, all aimed at cracking the whip on the political class. I'm one politician who is of the view that if you leave us loose with power, we may leave the room with empty coffers. So if somebody knows that on the radio somebody will be talking about his lifestyle, when he gets into office, he will be careful. I chaired Ghana Water Board. I tried some reforms. The reforms did not succeed. I saw Ghana Water sinking. The same public service machinery is used to fight good initiatives aimed at helping the system. And when it gets there, with the greatest respect, when a man does not have all the support, he often gives up. So it is not enough to talk about corruption, but we must look at a collective approach in how to deal with it. Because all of us, a lot of civil society organizations have their interests. For instance, let me take you through a practical situation. You have your source of funding. And that source of funding is involved in a problem somewhere. And this same source of funding is calling on you to intervene. Do you say because that source has sustained you all these years, you would stay back? But there may be an issue of corruption. So I see that sometimes the issue is more about people's interests than fighting the real canker. We cannot lay blame on one side. We have to be very collective and tackle it heads on. I've been hearing corruption against the business class, and also realize that politicians, when we come into office, our focus is who did business with who. And in the process, even Ghanaian businesses that are doing well suffer. But you have foreign entities that have gotten the same contract or even more or bigger in quantum. But because it's a foreign entity, there's nothing like corruption. Can we also look at that? Is it also born out of envy? How come Kojo Mensah Enterprise got this huge business? But if it is a foreign owned, there's nothing wrong. So we talk about cantonment, looting. But if you go there, you see Turkish, you see Americans, you see British, you see foreign nationals mounting high-rise buildings. Is it that if you are a foreigner, there's nothing like a corruption tag? But if you are Ghanaian, you would have to answer questions. So people then end up getting their own alter egos, hide behind them, and then find a way to say that, oh, it is an Indian business. Oh, if that is so, then OSP will not come after you because the owner is a foreigner. So, ladies and gentlemen gathered here in this room, I've heard Professor Kwesi Prempeh reviewing Kissi Agyebeng's speech. The laws are just not enough. It is our collective will, in my humble view. And in the process, as citizens, we must not ever give up. Because giving up would mean to lead us to a failed state. That cannot help us as a nation. Let us continue to crack the whip. Let us continue to be hard on the political class. But at the same time, other actors in that chain of corruption. Because if you leave the other actors and over-focus on the political class, dealing with the canker will still remain a big headache on our heads as a country. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Minority Leader MPA Futu Alexander Penyo-Markins. I think we can give him another round of applause. Thank you so much. Now, like I said earlier, the guest review is supposed to be done by two sides. I'm told by my colleagues at the One Ghana movement that the Honorable Ayariga should be joining us soon. But before then, I think we all have views, one on the Constitution, and we are all good men here, aren't we? We are all few good men. And so we can all make comments on what has been said by Kissi Agyebeng. Let's critique him, because that's what literature is about, really. Let's not criticize, but let's critique what he has come to say here. So at this stage, I'm going to actually let the microphone go around. So technical team, if you can give me a mobile mic, I'll be very happy. So that just show me your hand. I really am hungry to take the microphone to the IGP, but the people around him, they will arrest me. So I will not take it then. Since there's a special prosecutor, they will just start prosecuting me there and then. But I really wish, I think as many as want to hear the IGP say aye, the ayes have it, the IGP. So can I have the microphone around? Please show me your hand if you want to make a comment or ask a question in the audience. Anybody? Yes, please. So kindly bring the microphone to the gentleman in the hat. And Chairman of NCCE, I'll come to you. You have to speak. The Constitution is being discussed here.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jean-Paul Amegashi, and I'm an airline pilot. I got invited by one of the organizers of this committee. I'm just stand forward and face everyone. So the speech you gave was very moving. I was very touched, and it also focused a lot on corruption towards politicians and those in political office. And then I also see a lot of young lawyers or young student lawyers who are also present. I'm speaking from personal experience. I've faced a lot of sort of legal malpractice through my experience of lawyers in Ghana. And I feel like the corruption speech should also be directed at the ethics of lawyers in this country who take brief for clients, and they have superior legal knowledge, and instead of fighting for their clients, they sort of don't act in the interest of the clients. I do have a case against one of the largest airlines in Africa, currently at the appeal court, and the lawyer who was representing me at the time, for those who understand law, understand that if there's an appeal of a ruling in the appeal court on an interlocutory matter, once the records are settled, either the respondent or applicant can push for the matter to be heard or the appeal to be heard. In my case, the lawyer I had, and I won't mention names, he failed to push the matter for the appeal to be heard, and delayed me for about a year, and then stayed proceedings on my case, and then just withdrew. So this is so I'm saying this as a personal matter, because I like the fact that you mentioned there are a few good men, and I look at myself as one of those few good men. I have safety, as I was trained as a pilot in Canada, and for us the ethics of safety and public safety is of utmost importance, and it's part of the reason I'm in court against one of the biggest airlines in Africa. And I'm also studying law. I do have understanding of law in aviation law on a master's level, and I realized that most of the lawyers in Ghana I encounter also do not understand certain qualifications of law. So in short, I'm just trying to say all the corruption is directed at public officers. It should also be sent to the mind of the young lawyers coming up, that when they become lawyers, they should also be,
Thank you so much. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Okay, yes. The Honorable Leader of the House wants to take leave of us, and so thank you so much, Honorable Alex Apenyowakin, for joining us. Do I have any other hands up? Any comments or questions somewhere? Yes, I think I have a hand somewhere here. Yes. So kindly introduce yourself and then make your statement or ask your question.
I'm Latif Lawrence Johoye. I'm a student of Ghana School of Law, and I just want to add on the issue of corruption, and that it comes from our moral fabrics and how we even grow. And so in recent times, or for some time now, you would have parents, elderly people in society, who actually do not care about the means their wards, their children acquire certain properties. What is important for them is the fact that that property is being acquired and owned by their children, either whether it's foul or it's a right means. And so I think that it will go a long way if, just like Special Prosecutor has suggested, for us to take that education, if the religious bodies, if our teachers will take it as a matter of public interest. Because if we have normalized the act right from kindergarten right up to primary school to wherever we find ourselves in the educational ladder, people do not find it problematic that your child that is just about 16 years or 17 years is probably working in an institution 18 years and is owning assets that that the person cannot even acquire in a normal way of life. But we find that to be okay. However, we are the same people who will sit back and, just like Osahene Afenyomakin had said, point accusing fingers at political class. Then we segregate or kind of put a class as to whether corruption is only limited to the political class and take ourselves out. And so I think that if we need to have a comprehensive tackling of the issue of corruption, then we have to actually do a lot with the basics.
Thank you so much, Latif. Thank you. I have a hand here at this side, but there's somebody in the middle. Just let me hear from that person first.
Hi, my name is Eden Asumeni. I'm in the Faculty of Law for UPSC. My question is, I have a question actually, and the Special Prosecutor mentioned that the Attorney General is not suited to his role or cannot tackle.
Let me also just say briefly that the Inspector General of Police has also asked permission to take leave of us. He's been with us for the past 2 hours. Thank you so much, Dr. George Ekufu-Dampare. Please proceed.
Yes, the Attorney General cannot act in the Special Prosecutor's capacity because on. Okay. That's my question.
Thank you so much. So that's a student of UPSA Law School. Yes. Let me hear from here.
Thank you. My name is Osman Shehu Mohammed. I
hear from here.
Thank you. My name is Osman Shehu Mohammed at the Faculty of Central University. I want to ask a question. He cited Article 286, which talks about unexplained wealth. Now, I want to find out how is the Constitution in its current form able to tackle corruption in terms of unexplained wealth for people who are not in public office? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do I have any question from this aisle? This aisle. Let me take the last two questions from this side, and I'll come take the last one from Samson. Yes, madam. Yes, the lady. Thank you.
Okay. Please, my name is Belisha from UPSC Law School. So my question is, is there a possibility that corruption will be eliminated in Ghana? And if yes, does it mean that...
Wait, when you say a possibility, are you talking about in the future, currently,
yes,
in the next century?
Future.
Okay.
And if yes, does it mean the office of the special prosecutor will be dismissed after that?
Okay, thank you so much. Yes. Yes, sir. Please go ahead. Introduce yourself.
My name is Charles Amo Asante. I just wanted to know why we are putting so much emphasis on constitutional reforms and not considering several areas of reform which are necessary to support proper constitutional reforms. We have about 12 to 15 areas which need to be reformed in Ghana. Public sector reforms, legal reforms, judiciary reforms, police reforms, prison reforms, pension reforms, land reforms, tax reforms, educational reforms, health reforms. If you do not reform these areas, the constitutional reforms will be of little use because the corruption permeates in all these areas, and you are just going in a silos of solution which will not produce the results you want. And I would like to say that the legislature has failed us because they seem not to think that their actions are necessary to bring about changes. For example, the minority leader cited an area that they should have legislated to stop it. For example, they can legislate to prevent them from giving money to anybody, paying anybody's school fees, giving money to a priest or a chief and so on. They can have legislation which clearly prevents that. But they sit down and say that they have to give money because they enjoy corruption. And that is a problem.
Very well. Thank you so much, sir. Okay. Right in front of you. So let's make it 30 seconds at most if we can. So kindly introduce yourself.
Okay. My name is Ama Amoa. I know Ghanaians, we are very good with concepts like this. We break it down, we structure it, we systemize it, we do everything. But at the end of the day, the implementation. So I really hope that this program will not be in vain. We want to see it happening across Ghana so that we can be a witness to this.
Thank you so much. There's another lady in the middle. Yes.
My name is Shika Awuno. I'd like to say, Mr. Agyebeng, I really enjoyed your... Agyebeng, sorry. I enjoyed your submission.
Yes.
Especially the Hollywood movie titles that you sprinkled in there. I would like to assume that a few good men include a few good women as well.
Thank you so much. Yes. A few hands this way. There's a lady at the back.
Do you have your permission to?
No, I don't think he. Yes, please. A few good women. There's a good woman at the back there, in black and white. Another one in. I think that should be. I'm not good with colors. Let me not try. Yes.
Please, I'm Benewa, a UPSA law student. I'm asking a question. If opportunity are zero, there are still people who have the motive to partake in corruption. Does it mean our only option is to grow the few good men?
Thank you. That's for Chairman. Behind? Yes.
Please, my name is Francisca, a student of University of Ghana. Please, my question is to the Special Prosecutor. Please, do you think your office has done enough since its inception to fight corruption? If yes, why?
Thank you. Today, yes, please, in front of you. Yes. Let's try and get as many views and voices as we can, because we are shaping our nation, aren't we? So let's pay attention. Yes, madam.
Thank you very much. My name is Cornelia Amwa. I'm a retired journalist. It is so true that when you don't get a portion of the cake, then you seem to find out who is corrupt. There's so much going on all over the place, but where's the oversight? A lot of things are going wrong, but who is there to see and bring it up, and who is ready to bail the cat? We all know what is wrong. How do we go about it? My takeaway and my excitement is the call for the anti-corruption should be inserted in the school's curricula. We should do it so early that we grow up with it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's a lady on the left. Yes. A number of the ladies are joining. Since we titled the thing A Few Good Men, now the few good women are also. Yes, please.
Okay, hello. My name is Dr. Najo Agyebeng, and I have one question for the special prosecutor. My question is, there have been a number of reports about corruption at the passport office. I have had my fair share of that when I was trying to get my Ghanaian passport, and it wasn't easy. And it's sometimes, most of the time in this country, it's very difficult if you want to go by the book and do things in the right way and not be corrupt. Hence, the passport office ordeal, or my passport office ordeal. So I want to find out if the special prosecutor is aware of this and what is being done to curtail this situation, because it's not only the passport documents, a number of other documents are also have a similar situation when it's time to acquire them. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. There's another lady in the middle here, so I hand up there. Yes.
Good evening. This isn't necessarily a question I have. My name is Abena. This is an appeal I'm making to the conscience of every Ghanaian in here and outside of this room. It's an appeal to our conscience not to necessarily point fingers at politicians or people who are in the public offices and hold a position necessarily, but then we should look within ourselves as well, because we as Ghanaians are corrupt in little ways possible that we actually do not realize. And I don't think it's fair to people for us to point fingers when we have not checked ourselves. So in my opinion, we should check ourselves and then point fingers if we are not perfect. Okay. Because we also do certain things, although may not be as great to affect the nation, but in somewhat way it does. So this is an appeal I'm making to every Ghanaian and to every person in every nation to kindly not be corrupt in basic terms. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Let me take the last comment from Samson here. Yes, please.
Thank you, Maru. And I've enjoyed just listening to, as we like to say, ordinary people share their views, and the view that she just shared. When the special prosecutor is speaking, they speak from a point of experience. They speak from a point of what they know. And he may have woven some of them into the literary work you have enjoyed, but he's talking about actual situations and telling you the things that confront us, that corruption has become what will obliterate us from this country. Okay? It's so endemic, it's so bad, and we have to point at politicians because that's where the grand corruption is. Okay? And I like to use this example, and it's real, that a school is built, and it's supposed to have been built for how many millions? A little rainstorm, wind, and it's gone. Pupils may die. politician has pocketed the money. The road is done, and they tell you just a kilometer cost how much. The rains come, and the road is washed away. It happens only here. It won't happen anywhere else. So the people who drive that kind of corruption, they are the politicians. When we are told that as much as 3 billion, not Ghana cedis, United States dollars is unaccounted for in this country every year. Do you understand that? That's money that the people who give us know how the money came in, but how the money is spent is what they talk about. It's unaccounted for. What they mean is it's stolen. When Occupy Ghana picks 5 of the Auditor General's reports, 5 years, and does the auditing and finds that in those 5 Auditor General reports, money that was stolen and misused is about 3 times what we are at the IMF begging to get to save our economy from collapse. That's the reality. And Dom Levo keeps saying that because we are not punishing the corruption, that's why it's still with us and it's actually growing very bad. Why should the people that we have decided that they should help us fight the corruption be scared for their lives, go through a lot of risk, and they are not even resourced? The special prosecutor doesn't have the resources to do the work, but they are working. And you and I must have a voice that tells the people who oversee the purse that is where we want our money to be. So I was just having a little chat here with Prof. I can't believe how frustrated he may be. The Prof has been preaching for a long time here that it's wrong for parliamentarians to be appointed onto public boards because they are oversighting those institutions. When you make them a board member, how do they oversight that institution? Just 2 days ago, the president appointed Isaac Adongo to go to the Bank of Ghana board. If the Bank of Ghana does wrong, he's supposed to oversight them. How is he going to do it? So, this is the problem.
Okay. Thank you so much. Senor has the last bite. Senor. Yes, please give him the microphone. And then we'll get a quick mop-up response from the SP and also a reviewer if they are minded to do so. Yes, Senor, quickly.
Thank you, Umaru. I think I posted recently that corruption is corruption only when you are not benefiting from it. But when you benefit from it, it means His grace has found you. You have got a deal. I mean, you go to your pastor, blessings. The terminologies are endless. I can't agree more with the OSP when he says we want to fight corruption, but we don't want to fight it at all. It's more like not wanting the disease, not wanting the sickness, but you are okay with the disease or the germs. I don't even understand how that works. But what our review lecturer says is what we should really spend our energy really also on. How do we deal with the opportunity matter? We have tried very hard. I don't think that generally we are really good people. I have to come to that conclusion. We are let's be honest about it. I'm an employer, I'm a businessman. What Afenyo Markin said is more than true. You have the complaints, you have the leakages because they are not benefiting from it. I have sat with politicians who have joined me condemn corruption, but when they get the opportunity for the appointment, the first question they are asking me is that they are taking me here, they are taking me there. Where is everyone has scandal? You understand? These are the facts of life. The politicians have become economic agents. There's pressure on them. They themselves, just like us, are equally not good people. So if we want to fix this problem, we can't fix it by hoping to fix the motive matter. It won't change. Okay. The white man and the Awam people had the wrong motive. They had the opportunity. They dealt with us. We overthrew them, and we ended up dealing with our own selves. And we've been dealing with our own selves till now, and we are still claiming we don't want to be dealt with. It won't work.
Thank you, Senor.
The Constitution should be a vehicle for us to clean out the O. So, Prof, in this work that we are all doing with you, we hope that we'll be inspired by the work of the OSP and figure out how to clean out the O and improve the S, which will reduce the outcome of the equation, either to 0 or to a very little fraction.
Thank you so much, Senor. I think we can get a response now or reactions. SP, I think maybe respond to a few of the issues. So they talk about the independent of, your personal independent. They talk about unexplained wealth. They talk about, will corruption ever end? Do you think it will end? Also reforms. Should we start somewhere else rather than the Constitution? And then the issue of passport office. Someone has a personal grievance there. Either of you can take it. Either you or your reviewer. Okay.
This man.
He's good at passing the ball to me.
I know. I'm very weak. I keep saying yes.
You may kindly rise so the cameras will get you.
No, I think it's been a good conversation. I agree pretty much with, to the extent that we are talking about, and the reason why it's not that I like theory, but the reason why I like to reduce this to some analytical formula is that it allows you to isolate some of these factors, right? So the M component is basically all of us, right? It means that all of us are participants in this. We can all of us contribute to the M. If it's a moral issue, the clergy has a big role. They are not public officers, but they really affect our value systems in significant ways, our chiefs and elders and society generally. So yes, there is a role for everybody. The O speaks to a lot of the things that the OSP has, the special prosecutor has said. Things about prevention, for example. Corruption is really difficult to fight after the fact. And it's a point he made in his lecture. It's very difficult to fight after the fact because it usually happens behind closed doors amongst people who have an incentive to hide the act. So if you're waiting to fight corruption by going to find the evidence and all of that, it is really not something that is easy to do. And we are a nation of very, very scarce resources. So I think given the nature of the economy we operate, it's much better value for money for us to focus on prevention, which is why the O and the S matter to me a lot. Because if there is an indication that you will be punished, that sanctions are very likely to be visited upon you and they are going to be very punitive, if the S is really, really high, you will see that it will change a number of things about the C in the equation. So some of these things, it's not theory. You reduce it to some kind of analytical framework like that. It allows you to isolate the kinds of things that we're dealing with. So all of us are important. I like the point about the legal profession, right? Lawyers are disproportionately powerful in this place, whether they are in the bar or on the bench. And to the extent that we are using a law enforcement model to fight corruption, which is usually after the fact, right? We like to fight corruption through the law enforcement model. To that extent, the legal profession and the legal system matters a lot. I agree with the OSP. It shouldn't, ideally the OSP should be the recourse of last resort, right? We should not get to the OSP point. We should put in enough so that we can check these things before they happen. I will end with one anecdote based on my experience first time going to the US. So I was going to board a public bus. The very first time I was going to board a public bus. And of course, coming from Ghana, I thought, well, some conductor will collect my cash. Right? So this is way back. So I walk onto the bus and I don't see a conductor. I see the driver and I'm just handing him my money. Of course, immediately you know that this guy just came from some place. He looks at me funny. He says, and he points to this device next to the driver. And I walk back and I read. And it says, exact change only, put your money in that thing, that receptacle. It's a machine. And the driver doesn't handle cash. It's all written there. And then the last thing I read was, passengers ride for free if the machine is broken. So I went to sit at the back. I said, this is quite intriguing, right? This is why I started to do my C versus M thing. I said, what have these people just done? So here we are, we have a driver. It is very likely that the amount of monies he would collect on this route in a day or half a day would likely exceed his monthly or even yearly salary. It's possible. So what have they done? They have used technology. This small device there. They have assumed that M is plenty in this guy's mind. He could, make away with the money. But they have used this small thing there to take away the O. Right? So they say, put money, exact change only in that thing. It would not give you any balance. I think now these days they will. Then, if the machine is broken, look at that one. Passengers ride for free. So this is to tell the driver, look, if you break the thing, the money still won't come to you. Right? Passengers will ride for free if the thing is broken. Meanwhile, you are working for this company. You need for them to make a lot of revenue so that they can pay you. So you are not collecting money. The machine is broken. They ride for free. You have an incentive to keep the machine working. So what have they done? They have assumed M is plenty. Anybody will steal the money. This is how we should operate. They have assumed that there's going to be plenty of M. They put a device there to take care of the O. And I think where we are as a country, really, we just cannot afford to really spend. We don't have the money. We must do everything we can to minimize the opportunities for corruption. They are just too plentiful. It means that people can get away with murder, right? And so I would echo the sentiment of the OSP again. Prevention, the prevention side, we don't talk about it enough, right? The OSP, I think, has power to do something he calls corruption risk analysis, right? If you want to pass a piece of legislation or any law, the OSP can review it and say, this law, if passed, these are the various points at which you create opportunities for corruption. This law is not good for that reason. Change it here so that the discretion moves here. Put more transparency here. That kind of stuff. We should allow the OSP to do more of the prevention, right? Because seriously speaking, given the culture we are in, fighting corruption, even getting people to come and give the evidence is going to be very difficult. So I'm just being very practical about this. I like the fact that we have this institution. I played my own behind the scenes role in getting the law drafted and all of that. But I've come to see that it's really suffering, right? And it is indeed a collective action. And I agree with Charles, actually, my friend Charles, that the constitutional review, it's not the silver bullet. There are a lot of things that have to change, in the way we do a lot of laws, land transactions, Legal Profession Act, school admissions, it's all over the place. But to echo something, there's a reason why we have leadership, right? There's a reason why we elect and entrust certain people with power over us to take decisions that are difficult. So for me, I really don't think it is good enough reason to say that because this is an epidemic, it involves all of us and has deep moral roots and cultural roots and philosophical and all of that, that therefore we should excuse or put politicians and others on the same plane as us. No. I don't have the power to do a lot of things that politicians can do to stop corruption. I don't. Right? And maybe that also speaks to one tool we have never tried here. In some countries, it is a citizen can bring an action, right? In the US, in the federal contracting laws, if you know that somebody who is a federal contractor, private person, has cheated, either over-invoiced the government, has done something funny with the transactions they are having with the government, you can actually, as a private person, bring a lawsuit. And if you win, you get a very good chunk of the recovery, the money that you recover. This is one way to incentivize everybody to be policing those who do business with government. Because a lot of the information, usually the insiders know, the employees in the company know that our master is cheating the government. This thing was 2 cedis. They are billing us for 2,000. If you were able to somehow democratize corruption enforcement. Not leave it to just OSP or SHRAT, but say, give us, all of us, an incentive to be able to police the behavior of those who act with the state. Some of those things are important. So we should look at different models, how people are dealing with this corruption issue, because it's all over the place. So every country is trying to fight it. Unfortunately, we're not doing enough to fight it. We need it more than most of the countries that are fighting it, because we are very much in dire straits. And I think we should do it before either our economy collapses even worse than it has collapsed. But I think in my case, worse if our democracy collapses, because then that will throw us into anarchy. We should do something soon. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Prof. H. Kwesi Prempeh. Thank you so much. Okay, yes. SP, the way you're looking at me, I'm scared. I don't have unexplained wealth. It was an inheritance from my grandfather.
Worry. I won't declare you wanted. There were some passionate questioners, that is why I got up. I could sense in the voices consternation. For the lady from UPS who asked whether we can drive away corruption and afterwards we can all go home and sleep, I wish I could say so. That's the human condition. In the ordinary circumstances of mankind, there will always be deviants, and so unfortunately we cannot weed out corruption. But what we can do, and what I stated, is to drive it down, make it unattractive, make it costly, so that when you are engaging in it, you will have it at the back of your mind that there will be a price to pay if we come around looking for you. And with that, we can have a certain level of an accepted degree that it's allowable in every society. Criminality, there will always be, but let's tackle it. I sense from, as I said, the passion that maybe I didn't make myself clear enough in terms of what I stated during the address, and Prof has just touched on it. I said forcefully that from where we sit, from my experience, what we've done so far, we believe that preventing corruption is a better focus than after the fact running after it. I remember saying that better it is to prevent the outbreak of a stitch than to go seeking to stitch it after it ensues. On so many occasions, we are asked, how many people have you imprisoned? How many people have you taken to jail? And all that. It's as our focus. I mean, don't get me wrong, very, very perfect and a reasonable expectation, but if we manage to imprison, let's say 4 or 5 people in a year, I'm being optimistic. The way our legal system is arranged, lots of lawyers and lots of law students, a good defense counsel can delay the case for years. I'm just saying, if we are able to imprison 5 people in a year, praise the Lord, hallelujah, what would we have achieved in terms of contrasting it with if we managed to prevent them from committing what they committed in the first place? And so it's about plugging the loopholes, making it difficult for you to engage in corruption. Prof, your man's job, what you and your team did in respect of Act 959, but then when it came to LI 2374, everything was thrown haphazardly, because the main function of the OSP, which should be corruption prevention, we put it in Regulation 31 in a very, it's as if we don't even want you to go there, we don't want you even to do it. you can tell from the lawmakers' perspective that it was not that important to the lawmaker when it came to the drafting of those provisions. And then guess what? Hey, I said my amico can, but I'll still say it. One of the provisions came up in court, written black and white there. The court said we couldn't do it. Meanwhile, it was there. The very first provision, black and white, said we couldn't do it. And this is one of the reasons why I was calling for the fight to be really forcefully directed at prevention. Because, as you keep saying, giving people the opportunity, they will take it. Someone will say, oh, that's my destiny helping, right? So, do not present the opportunity to the person to take it. It is tempting. We are human. You do one thing, a second time, maybe should I do it a third time? Then it becomes a habit. And that should be our focus. Professor, I will say again, write corruption into the Constitution. Write anti-corruption into the Constitution. Framework it tightly. Put the OSP into the Constitution. Kill the argument. Let us start fighting. We are pretending. Really, we are pretending.
Thank you so much, SP. The president appointed the committee and his chairman. The SP is giving it a new mandate. I want to see that mandate. I want to see a usurpation of the powers of the president being executed by the SP. It could be ground for removal. You never know. But it's great. I think we get a sense and we get a picture that he has painted. It's a very sad one. But let's pray that it gets well and it gets better. Thank you so much, SP. It's been really an insightful night, and we can have more of it. We wish we can bring in you every year, but we know it will be difficult to get you. But thank you so much. We appreciate it. I think our speakers tonight deserve a round of applause, and I think we should do that for them. So, like I said, this is an event organized by One Ghana Movement with support from the UPSA Law School. So to give us a closing remarks, I'm going to invite from the UPSA the head of Department of Public Law at UPSA Law School, Albert Kwashigan, to do that. Yes, thank you so much.
Good evening, all of you. Umaru Sanda, thank you very much for this opportunity. I stand here in the name of the UPSA Law School and representing the Dean of the UPSA Law School, Professor Ernest Kofi Abochi, who should have been with us today, but for some reasons he's elsewhere engaged in some other equally important assignment. And so he extends his apology, but I'm here to say a few words on his behalf. And while I represent him at the UPSA Law School, if I made any comment, I take full responsibility for the comments that I make, if I did make one. Let me begin by acknowledging my Vice Dean, Dr. Francisca Kissi Agyebeng, who is the UPSA Law School. Doc, you're welcome. Mine is to give closing remarks and then give a vote of thanks. I think that this whole lecture has been self-explanatory, and there isn't much to say, to be very honest. If my former lecturer has spoken, who am I to come and try to rehash what he has said? The OSP taught me at the University of Ghana Law Faculty, probably like 18 or so years ago. He taught me international humanitarian law. And so it's good to see him, and we have all been following the good work he's been doing for Mother Ghana. So much has been said. I wish to implore you to put your hands together for the OSP. Let me also say a very big thank you to Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh,
who I know is currently involved in a very big national assignment, the Constitution Review Committee work. Wish you all the best. Now let me say a very big thank you to One Ghana movement for making it possible to have these Constitution Day lectures the last 4 or 5 years. So the team from One Ghana, Sam Salari Anine, my good friend Senyo Hosi, and Umaru Sanda, your team, we are indeed grateful that you partner very well with the UPSA Law School to create such an important platform to receive views from across the country. I think it's been very wonderful. Very powerful views have been expressed. One thing that jumps to me is that the attitude towards corruption is that we want to fight corruption, but we don't want to fight corruption. I mean, these days, I get extremely worried when I visit little places to get things done for me. For instance, I go to the washing bay, and then those who wash the car get exceedingly excited. And then I ask myself, I mean, this excitement, is it the usual display of the Ghanaian hospitality, or he's expecting something from me? So I get extremely suspicious. So usually when I see that, what I do is that I try to find somebody else who has not shown so much interest in me. Because the next time he's done, he's going to ask me, the company takes this, but you should also add this amount of money. And I've never really understood it. Sometimes they tell you how much you should add to it. And so we are very happy that we are able to provide the platform for us to continue to engage on this issue. It's not going to be an easy fight, but I believe that with self-introspection, looking at our own selves, and with using our institutions to block the opportunities for corruption, I believe that we can get somewhere. So on this note, I'd like to say a very big thank you to all of you for coming to grace this occasion. The Dean extends his warmest regards to all of you. Thank you for coming. Enjoy this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Albert Kwashiga, my senior at CTFM. And thank you all for being a wonderful audience tonight. It's been great coming your way. A few announcements before we leave. One, we have early dinner, so it's around. Or while you do your networking, you can also have a cup of coffee or whichever one you prefer, and then have a conversation going. But before we sign out, at One Ghana, what we always do is to invoke the national patriotic songs and pledges that we have been taught. So at the beginning, we had the Yanara Assassini sung for us. In closing, we're going to do the national pledge. So if you could kindly be on our feet so that we do the national pledge. And I'm going to lead you in that. Don't worry, I wrote it down. I know we will not remember it, so I wrote it down. So if I'm reading, don't think I'm in Shabrebia. So I think we usually put our hand on our chest. So I promise on my honor to be faithful and loyal to Ghana, my motherland. I pledge myself to the service of Ghana with all my strength and with all my heart. I promise to hold in high esteem our heritage won for us through the blood and toil of our fathers. And I pledge myself in all things to uphold and defend the good name of Ghana. So help me God. Thank you so much. It's been great coming your way. This is Umaru Sandamadu signing out with you from the Alisa Hotel. Have a good evening, everybody.